Hello, viewers. Foods with modified DNA are referred to as genetically modified food, or GMOs. This is typically accomplished by genetic engineering, in which a new characteristic that does not normally present in their species is included into the meal. GM foods are frequently used to describe foods created with GM organisms. Despite the fact that selective breeding and growing techniques have historically resulted in genetic alterations, modern scientific advancements have made this approach possible. However, genetically engineered crops are frequently seen as two-edged swords. This is due to the fact that they have a number of benefits and drawbacks. We shall describe them in the video we have for you today. Watch until the end to hear about all of the pros and cons, from boosting crops, pest resistance, and environmental benefits to allergic reactions to outcrossing and more. First, the advantages. They have better food appeal. Genetically engineered foods can have their colors altered or enhanced to make them more aesthetically pleasant to consume. Deeper hues alter how the brain interprets the object being consumed. Deeper crimson hues provide the impression that food is sweeter even when it isn't. Foods that are more colorful are thought to have superior nutrition and tastes. Does the color of the meal appeal to you more, or does it not really matter? Tell us immediately in the comments box below. Better crops. Crops may be modified using GM technology to endure harsh weather, which is one of its key benefits. This implies that even in adverse or severe weather circumstances, there will be acceptable quality and adequate harvests. Farmers are forced to plant crops in places that were not initially suited as populations increase worldwide and more land is used. Additionally, they must cultivate plants that can endure prolonged droughts as well as soil and groundwater with high salt concentrations. They can still produce good crops thanks to GM technology. Additionally, genetically modified plants may develop increased resistance to unanticipated illness. Consider the technique to be a vaccine for the species, but one that is encoded into their genes as opposed to being administered through the immune system. Transport is simpler because GMOs have a longer shelf life and can thus be moved farther distances. With this development, it is now possible to transport surplus food items from one community to another, which may be suffering from a food crisis. GMO food has a possibility to reduce food waste, especially in poor countries, which could lead to the elimination of hunger. They cost less. GMO plants have been developed to grow quickly. In comparison to conventional crops, farmers can produce the same amount of food using less land, less water, and fewer pesticides. Food producers can charge less for GMO goods since they can conserve resources. Food prices, such as those of corn, beets, and soybeans, may occasionally be reduced by 15% to 30%. Resistance to insects. Some GMO crops have undergone modifications to increase their resistance to insects and other pests. Crops can be treated with toxic bacteria that are safe for human consumption to make them insect repellent. Because fewer pesticide chemicals are put on the plants as a result, they are exposed to fewer harmful pesticides. Enhanced nutrient content. Genetic alterations add pest resistance, but they also affect other traits. Crops' nutritional composition can also be changed, offering a denser nutritional profile than what was available to earlier generations. This suggests that future generations may be able to consume less food while still getting the same level of nourishment. For instance, significant quantities of vitamin A can be produced by genetically modifying rice. This may lessen the world's vitamin shortages. New items. In order to grow in harsh climates, such as those found in dry or frigid regions, new types of crops are being developed. For instance, researchers have created a new variety of tomato that thrives in salty soil. Excluding the gene that gives coffee beans their caffeine, resulting in decaffeinated coffee beans, is another excellent genetic engineering discovery. The fact that these can then be grown naturally is the finest part. Using GM, more plants and crops can be cultivated in more places, including those that were previously unsuitable for farming, which reduces global warming. This has increased the amount of oxygen in the air, lowered the amount of carbon dioxide, and hence lessened global warming. In reality, a research indicated that the over 10 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions have been significantly reduced thanks in large part to genetically modified crops. This is the same as taking 5 million automobiles off the road annually. Medical benefits. Genetic changes allow for the production of specific proteins, vaccines, and other pharmaceutical products through a process known as farming. This technique offers less expensive ways to enhance one's health and might alter how patients receive some medications in the future. The future of this technology is the ability to eat your tetanus vaccine with supper rather than getting an injection. Reduced application of pesticides and herbicides. Pesticides and herbicides pose specific risks to farmland that could ultimately render the soil useless. Genetically modified food farmers don't need to use these items as frequently. As a result, the soil can gradually rebuild its nutrient base. The farmer still gets a predictable harvest because the genetic resistance is built into the plant itself. Additionally, it results in fewer crops being destroyed, improving productivity for the producers. GM crops are beneficial to the environment since they frequently take less time, labor, and resources than conventional crops. They may also aid in lowering greenhouse gas emissions, soil erosion, and environmental pollution. This implies an improvement in the general well-being and aesthetics of the area surrounding farms. Better water and air quality are preserved as a result, which may also indirectly improve everyone's health. Let's now discuss the drawbacks of eating foods that have been genetically modified. Allergic reactions. The most frequent adverse consequence of eating GM food in people is an allergic reaction. When an allergen found in the GM crop enters the body and triggers an immune response, this occurs. Foods that have undergone genetic modification are made by introducing alien genes into living things. Since these implanted genes might also contain certain allergens that elicit an immunological reaction, this technique is thought to have harmful effects on humans. There is also the worry that new allergies could develop as a result of the mingling of genes from different organisms. Additionally, since some of the added genes are from viruses and bacteria, the potential for disease transmission exists as well. Might result in superbugs. A few pests typically manage to live when insecticides are used. As a result, the next generation develops a resistance to the chemical, necessitating either the use of stronger or more pesticides. With this more potent poison, the insects become even more tough, which ultimately promotes the development of superbugs that reduce food supplies. Not only on crops, but also inside your home and yard, bugs can be a real pain. Watch 8 Sure Ways to Permanently Get Rid of Fruit Flies to understand how to get rid of them. Returning to the advantages and disadvantages of genetically modified food resistance to antibiotics. The ability of people to fight off illness may be impacted by genetic alteration, which might increase a crop's resistance to disease or make it more tolerant to herbicides. The likelihood of foodborne genes spreading to the body or gut flora is very low. Genes in some GMO plants make them resistant to specific antibiotics. This resistance might be transmitted to humans. Antibiotic resistance is rising among people all across the world, and GMO foods may be part of the problem. Outcrossing. The possibility of GMO genes fusing with those of normal crops is known as outcrossing. It is possible for new genes to be incorporated into the progeny of organic, traditional plants or crops that are miles away when this occurs across long distances. Because it is impossible to tell which crop fields are organic and which are not, it is difficult to correctly identify non-GMO food. Lower level of biodiversity. This technique could have the unintended consequence of harming some organisms in the ecosystem, which could result in a lower level of biodiversity. It's possible that when we get rid of a pest that harms crops, we're simultaneously getting rid of a certain species source of food. Additionally, some creatures may find genetically modified crops to be poisonous, which could cause a decline in their population or the extinction of such organisms. Animal protein may be impacted. In the United States, the vast majority of plants have undergone genetic modification. Following that, these crops are fed to cattle, which has an impact on animal-based foods. GMOs can be found in milk, seafood, eggs, and animal muscle tissue. In addition, as bees pollinate genetically modified plants, honey may possibly include GMO components. The advantages of eating food that has been genetically modified are very obvious. However, there are several foods that you should consume frequently for optimal health. This is all for today. Thank you for staying with us. Don't forget to like and subscribe our channel. See you soon.